Welcome to The Officials. Great program today. EVs versus ICE. Who wins? You be the judge. Well, hello everybody and welcome to the latest edition of The Officials. What do we have for you today? Let's start with the fun stuff. We have a lot of things on EVs. We're really going there, aren't we? Anyway, there is a big car show in Guangzhou in China. And just to give you a flavor of what is happening there were 512 new models displayed. Now imagine that, 512 new models. And these are all the car brands. In China right now, there are roughly 130 car manufacturers, but we hear more coming in. And of course, also the foreign brands. So Volvo, Audi, Ford, all of them were showing their wares. But there is really a revolution in the quality of the EVs. They're taking over. All the economics show that if you're a buyer and you care about a budget, you should buy an EV in China. We cannot say the same thing here or in other countries where electricity is so expensive, but in China, definitely you must. And in the world politics, most governments want to keep the cost of electricity low. This would mean that probably EVs will beat gasoline as a mode of transportation. This has a great impact into the consumption of gasoline as a whole in China, then later on in other countries as China sells more of those cars. And we continue to think that the ability of the market to absorb the changes is falling behind. Because, for instance, and time will tell whether we are right or the other guys are right. But we don't think that the big forecasters, EIA, IEA, OPEC, all of them, their numbers are right regarding China's consumption. They're overstating it. And we were reading a paper today by VTOL, by their research department. And again, they think that the demand in China is going to continue in line with trend. I mean, we really don't think so. We don't see that at all. More than 50% of the new cars in China are EVs. So how can gasoline consumption continue on trend? That's defying gravity, really. And construction in China may be above the peak in terms of housing demand and in terms of projects. We were talking also about the rail network in China, which is so extensive on fast speed. All of this has an influence on gasoline demand, diesel demand, and also on jet demand, because people use more the train for the shorter hops than a plane would. So those are some of the things that we're going to explore here with my colleagues in more detail. The other things are the missile attack by Russia into the Dnipro, where a missile that has the capability of carrying a nuclear bomb covered the distance from Astrakhan to the Dnipro in 5 minutes, and nothing could stop the missile. The US and Britain, Germany, and France increased the temperature by allowing Ukraine to attack directly Russia with the missiles that require direct guidance from the West. So we don't know what is happening there, but politically, it almost seems that the expiring, another word would be dying administration in the US and in many of these countries, including Germany, are trying to force the hand of Trump to increase the war in Ukraine and Russia so that when Trump comes in, he cannot pull back. We're also going to explore a little bit of what we expect next week in terms of gasoline consumption with Mita, our latest addition to the show, because we are a little bit more bullish than normal, I would say. We're going to explore what happened with the inventories in the US with the latest data. But next week is Thanksgiving, and we expect peak demand in the year for gasoline and jet travel. So why don't we start or hand over to the folks here on the issue of China, and then we go one by one. Will, why don't you want to go into more detail into what you see happening there?
Yeah, so China's been really interesting recently. On the EV front, like you said, exceptionally strong. We've seen registrations just grow and grow and grow. Some statistics for you here. Li Auto had 12,300 registrations, and Zeekr 6,000 registrations, Leap Motor 8,500 registrations just in the week ending 17th of November. So that's a lot of new spending that we haven't seen
But the key issue here is what is the change year on year? And on some figures that I'm seeing is closer to the 20% growth, isn't it?
Yes. So spending on vehicles on a year-on-year basis is up 29% in November. So
China is back.
So in some regards, China is looking a little bit stronger. And we're also seeing that in the property sector a little bit as well. So new home total square meter transactions have increased by 7.3% between the 1st and the 17th of November. That's a rapidly growing statistic.
So the confidence, in a way, is coming back. The early data is showing a change in the trend. Yes. Whether we go to the old trend, as Vital says, we don't think so, but there is a per cap, right?
Exactly. We're starting to see some of those leading indicators show positive signs. But one key concern for the CCP and the PBOC is going to be credit growth. So outstanding loans in China are growing at the slowest pace since 1998. And that has been a downward trend in the past 2 years. At the same time, we've had the PBOC consistently cutting rates. So whilst we've been in a monetary easing cycle, we're also seeing appetite for credit dry up. So I think this speaks a lot to the efficacy of monetary policy in China. They have such a high savings rate that it becomes very difficult to inject that stimulus if it just ends up in someone's savings account. And reducing the interest rate has not been sufficient to stop people saving and get people to start borrowing again.
So the issue really is confidence then. Yeah. Because if you have the savings in your bank account, you really don't need the government to give you money. What you need is the confidence to go and say, I spent.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And this is kind of happening now, isn't it?
It seems to be. And you know, those leading indicators that we discussed are really, really reassuring there. It shows that there is appetite for people to start spending again. Are we back to where we were pre-Evergrande crisis? Probably not. Yeah. But it seems like the economy is turning that way.
And I would recommend the viewers to go and check some of the videos online about the Guangzhou car exhibit, because there's some really nice ones. I'm not a car driver, but now I feel like I want to have one, right? And I'm not talking about ICE, I'm talking about EV. So going on with the show, Ed, the Energy Information Agency had some interesting inventories, which were being interpreted, like most data is, differently by different people. And of course, in a way, I forced my way of thinking into some people, which is not fair. So I would like to hear your view on that data.
Well, yeah, the headline is 550,000 barrels billed in inventories in the most recent weekly data. So that would suggest lower demand. The US perhaps isn't, the demand from the US isn't as strong as we perhaps hoped. But when you look at the breakdown of it,
the granular detail.
Yeah, there is some more interesting and some gems. So for instance, the PAD 3 crude stocks fell by 4 million barrels. And that's a huge, huge fall.
And by the way, that's when I went bullish.
Yeah, exactly. And then the imports into the US were up by, I think, 1.18 million barrels per day. So you see exactly where the build is coming from. They're just bringing more crude in. So if they're bringing more in, that suggests they need more.
And diesel as well.
Diesel as well, yeah. Distillates dropped by about 110,000 barrels. So there's some solid demand there. And I think as we go into winter, diesel and distillates is a more important product to look at in the stocks than gasoline, which tends to be less important in winter after the driving season. But I think Mita actually has some more details
I wanted
on
to say, one should never dismiss any element of data. But my brain somehow dismissed the build in gasoline, which was rather substantial. And my brain said, don't worry about it. It's no longer gasoline demand.
Yeah, from memory, it was about 2 million barrels of
Yeah.
gasoline built. So it's a significant
But
move.
it is. Then Mita comes in with the golden strike. So Mita, can you explain how you see the gasoline market?
So yeah, you're completely right. So US gasoline inventories increased by around a little over 2 million barrels week on week. But and interestingly, this build was across different bad regions. But this is a time when we do typically see builds in gasoline. So this wasn't too surprising. What is interesting though is that looking at historical averages, gasoline stocks are currently 2.2% lower month on month, and they are 4.6% lower compared to 5-year averages. So we are currently, I've got a chart here which I can have up there as well. Currently, stocks are low compared to historical levels. In PAD 3 specifically, they're 6.8% lower year on year and slightly lower month on month as well. And the same goes with PAD 1, which is the New York Harbor, which is really important for gasoline. So because of that, if you look at financially, RBOB has been really strong recently. So the front rubber has been really strong because of reasons. The main reason cited for this is tightness in the US Gulf Coast. For example, the RBOB spread, that is just DEC Jan, went up from 2 cents per gallon on 11th November to 6 cents per gallon now. So that is, for a spread, pretty significant. And we previously saw this support around the time of the election, but that was linked to Trump and tariffs because soybean oil in the US increased and because of just the proposed tariffs on China that just made used cooking oil increase and RINs went up, RBOB went up, all of that happened. So, but right now we are seeing RBOB strong despite RINs being weaker. And one aspect of that could be the EIA stats, considering despite the build stats there still is this tightness with stocks being on the lower end of 5-year averages. The other side of the coin is that we're approaching Thanksgiving in the US, and that is the demand side story.
Yes.
So, yes, sorry, you were saying.
Next week should be peak demand ever in the US, I think.
So I think it'd be interesting to see how this unfolds because according to AAA, the US Auto Club, they mentioned that a record 71.7 million people are expected to travel by car over the holiday, which is 1.3 million more travelers than last year. But if you look at just EIA's US gasoline demand, so I think this looks at product supplied, which is a proxy for demand in the US, you can see a significant increase when you look at 4-week averages from last year to this year. At the same time, there's other travel data that's not as promising. So if you look at TSA's, just like the number of people that come in, I think they do this measure of the people that come into are checked by TSA. So it's just like a measure of people coming in for air travel. That's been very similar just year on year, and you'd expect that to increase year on year, just at least for every year. So, and in fact, if you look at that chart right now, it's declining at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how this changes closer to Thanksgiving, whether it just goes in line with averages or whether it's...
My thinking is that following the Trump election, the stock markets went up a little bit. There is more confidence in the marketplace. So if you feel that it's sunny in America again, good morning America, then you say, let me drive some more, let me go see my parents, let me spend, let me treat myself, right? Because the value of my stock holdings are good and so on. So I think this optimism leads to more consumption. As we are talking about China, if there's more optimism, there is confidence. Time will tell. And I think we can invite you in 2 weeks or when the data for next week comes out to review and see what happens, because there's a huge difference in what you think and what actually happens all the time.
Completely agree. And I think we're just bringing up with the TSA data, I think it's just super, there is slightly scattered data in terms of some people are saying there's going to be this surge of demand around Thanksgiving, some saying that it's going to be pretty linked close to averages. So it'd be interesting to see how demand for gasoline, considering the supply tightness in the Gulf Coast, is affected by this. I'd love to be here in 2 weeks to see how that unfolded.
I am optimistic.
Yeah.
Now, what I am not so optimistic is on the ongoing strife, as I alluded at the beginning, in Ukraine and also in the Middle East. Just give us a wrap up of how you see those things happening.
Yeah. So over the weekend, the Western, the NATO powers, the US, UK, France, etc., they permitted Ukraine to use their weapon systems to strike into Russian territory. Yeah. Most of that is expected to be limited to the Kursk region, where the Ukrainians had already started an incursion into Russian territory. So that hopefully won't be too extensive and won't aggravate the situation. But the Russian response has been unyielding and is pretty powerful. They've launched an ICBM. So this is a missile that has a range of over 5,500 kilometers. And as you said, it takes minutes. It's a very, very powerful weapon. However, it's not useful really as a conventional missile, just an A to B land blow up. It's more useful because it's incredibly expensive and it's pretty inaccurate really for the cost. So it's more useful as a transport for a nuclear weapon. So that's the message that Putin is sending. He's sending the next one could be the big one. Yeah. And my stick is bigger than yours. Back down or else. So hopefully that won't boil over or anything.
And we were, with our dark humor, joking this morning about the bets in the poly market, about nuclear exchange between the East and the West. And what are the latest bets saying?
I think it was 10% odds on a nuclear detonation in action before the end of the year. So we've got 40 days.
Imagine that.
Event.
That's pretty horrible that people are actually putting money thinking that there could be such possibility. And meanwhile, the ICC is also showing us that they do have some backbone, if I cannot use some other word that I cannot use in polite company. So what?
Yeah, they've got some guts. They've the ICC, so the International Criminal Court, has issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, certain figures in the Hamas leadership, and Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister in Israel. So any member country to which these people travel will be obliged to arrest them and turn them over to the International Court. But interestingly, the US is not a member.
Yes.
Conveniently.
Plus, the upcoming head of the Senate threatened the ICC with, torture or something, if they did what they have done. Yeah. So it takes a lot of backbone to actually issue the warrant. Of course, nobody will be arrested. But it's a moral stance, is the way I would see it.
One of the aspects of the Middle East I'm slightly more optimistic on now, though, is the Hezbollah involvement in or Hezbollah-Israel conflict, because a lot of the rhetoric coming out of Hezbollah has been more in favor of ceasefire, talking about the details and wanting to remain a political force within Lebanon. So maybe we could see a bit of a movement there, and I'm cautiously optimistic. But
that would be very welcome.
Really
and then to wrap up our program, I think we will talk a little bit about Total, who has been buying more than one cargo, maybe more than 10, maybe 19, to be precise, in the Middle East. What have you seen, Will?
Yeah, so Total have been pretty aggressive in the Middle East recently. We've seen them bidding for a lot of Dubai cargoes. And so far they've picked up, like you said, 19 of the 28 cargoes that have traded in the Middle East. But they've also been active in the North Sea as well. I think they got 6 cargoes from the North Sea this month as well. So yeah, they're buying a lot of crude. And we have seen structures weaken. So this month, for example, the Dubai physical premium has been about 62 cents, whereas last month it was $1.53. So maybe they're just being opportunistic there. But I don't know. I think they've been buying a lot. So where do you think they're going? I've been speaking
in the words of the traders, this is a play, right? Because it's rather large, the purchasing they're doing during the month. The rumors, of course, is that this oil is going to China, where it always goes. It's either whether it goes through the hands of Total and somebody else, or through the hands of Vitol, through the hands of PetroChina, or through the hands of Unipec, and they end up there. But it is always a funnel. And in this month, the funnel is Total. There's even a rumor that we want to share with you that some of those PG cargoes are destined to come into Europe. In the initial mathematics we did, they don't make a lot of sense. But if you want to make cargoes disappear to drive the premiums up, maybe you do things like that. Again, the future will tell us that. And in the meantime, the underground is firming a little bit after declining. So if these conditions continue with China, we may see numbers closer to 75 than to the upper 60s. So we will continue relaying to you the data we get, but this is about the more bullish we have been in the last 3 months, I want to say. So Merry Christmas to everybody. Well, thank you everybody for listening to the latest version of the officials. I'm sure you're enjoying it. And also, please read the officials online. You can get it through LinkedIn or directly through Onyx Hub. And more people are asking us for direct delivery via email. If you do want the copies to go directly into your inbox, please just send us a note. You can drop it on LinkedIn or directly on our mobile phone, and we'll send it to you. So thank you very much.